In defiance of decaf, huh? Is that what that says?
Of decay. But decaf.
Oh,
too, yeah.
I was gonna say decaf too, man. That's the way I feel about it. Yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Dave. Welcome back to the Fossores Chapter House Podcast. This season, of course, we have a joint podcast with FAITH RX, and I'm joined by my co-host, Liz Kirchmeier, the CEO of FAITH RX. And today, we have one of the great OG CrossFitters, Jason Khalipa. So, Jason, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I was just saying before we started recording that you said, oh, is there anything, off top? Or I said to you, I'm probably going to ask you more questions than you're going to probably ask me today. So I'm fired up. I'm ready to chat.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, I tell you, way back in the early days when we started CrossFitting, I mean, you were a towering figure in those fantastic days. So I feel a little bit like a kid meeting Wayne Gretzky at the side of the hockey rink or something, which I'm sure you get that a lot.
Every now and then, but yeah, it's my CrossFit journey was awesome. I learned a lot through competing professionally there, learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about a bunch of things. And, just like anything, right? You have seasons in your life and you evolve. I hope anybody listening was like a hardcore CrossFitter back in the day, and maybe even a hardcore CrossFitter now, really into it. I hope that they've evolved, as a husband, as a father, in all different areas. And sometimes I look back and it's like, oh, those were really good times. And they were, right? But, things evolve when your kids grow up, when your business grows. I mean, that's kind of where we're at today. It's just a whole different focus than it was back then.
So I have a question for you real fast. The rumor is that you have started jujitsu. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if at this point it's a rumor. I mean, yeah, I've been talking about, so I've been doing jujitsu for about 9 years. So yeah, I started competing professionally in CrossFit in 2008. I competed professionally throughout 2016. So about a decade. Then my daughter got sick in 2016. So I pivoted away from the sport, couldn't dedicate the time that it required to train. And I found jujitsu right around the same time. And I've been doing jujitsu, still obviously getting after it in the gym, of course, but I've been doing a lot of jujitsu for the last 8-9 years. I'm currently a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. For those people that are familiar with it, there's 5 belts in jiu-jitsu. It goes white, blue, purple, brown, black. And that's kind of where I'm at in the journey right now.
Well, that makes me super excited. I've been training jiu-jitsu for 15 years. I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu, first degree, almost second degree. I know, so exciting. And I have a gym here in Jackson. So when I heard that, I was like, I am so excited about jiu-jitsu. So most people love you for jiu-jitsu, for CrossFit. Yeah.
There's so much to learn in jiu-jitsu. I think CrossFit is phenomenal, right? All the hard workouts, it's given me so many gifts. But jiu-jitsu is like nothing else in the world. I mean, it is like no other physical expression that I've ever experienced. And, when you're getting choked or when you're having to overcome something and then be able to get out of that position and what it does for you mentally, physically. I mean, it's just, I'm a huge jiu-jitsu advocate, and congratulations on your black belt. I'm in it for the long game for sure.
Awesome.
Has your level of intensity, your passion to jiu-jitsu changed at all over the 9 years? Like, are you more fired up now than you were? Are you just as fired up? Is it diminished at all?
That's a good question. When I originally got into CrossFit, I was very inspired by the complexity, right? So what I loved about it was, I came up, I was 15 at the conventional gym. So when I was 15, I started working at the health club. I sold gym memberships. I did the thing. And when I got to college, I ended up doing sales at this gym, and it was great, right? I got into Muay Thai, I got into bodybuilding, it was great. But then when I was introduced to CrossFit, I really fell in love with this idea of complexity, learning my first snatch, learning my first muscle up, learning my first name the thing. And over the next 10, 15 years, I dedicated myself to just getting better and better and better. Well, eventually, you can only get so much better at the muscle up or the handstand push-up or whatever it was. When I found jiu-jitsu, it unlocked a whole new category of movements for me. And one of the things I find unique about jiu-jitsu is, although in my opinion, I think there's some gaps there from a strength conditioning side, which I think CrossFit could support. There is no gap in terms of learning new skills. I mean, every day you learn something new. And then on top of that, there's like 10 more ways you could do it. So for that, I'm only getting more inspired every day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every roll, even if you do, put on an arm bar or a triangle, like depending on who you're doing it against, it's different every single time. It's like, man, I like that you say that.
Well, it's like a game of chess, right? And in CrossFit, and I guess it's a good analogy for life too, right? Like in CrossFit, it was you against the barbell, you against your competitors, you against the thing you had to compete against. And in jiu-jitsu, it's a little bit different because it's you against a dynamic competitor, right? It's you against this dynamic individual. You have no idea what they're going to do. It's like a game of chess, and you have to react to their movement. And similar to life, right? Like life, you can only control what you can control. And sometimes as you're outside, things occur, and your ability to adapt and overcome and succeed, I think, is incredibly important, obviously. And jiu-jitsu is a good lesson for that because you can't control your competitor.
Mm-hmm. You said you started jiu-jitsu around about the same time that your daughter got sick.
That's right.
Was that therapeutic for you? I mean, you just talked about the fact that there's certain things you can't control. You can't very well control illness, let alone the severe illness of a child. What was that whole journey like? Did you feel like you were mirroring with your body what you were going through with your family?
I think what it was for me, I needed an outlet, for months and months. I slept at a hospital. I used to park a truck outside and put some barbells, and, I basically kind of retired for a little bit of time with the company, kind of put in other people's hands as we, overcame the challenges. And I needed something to allow me to be present and focus on something other than this illness. And for those who are unfamiliar, my daughter had leukemia. She's since been cured. But that was a long journey. And what I found about jiu-jitsu that I loved is that I have this mindset called AMRAP mentality, where you're just like present and focused, you're just getting after it. And I found that jiu-jitsu was the only thing that I could find that allowed my thoughts not to escape me. And whereas in fitness, I was so good at it that I could be like doing thrusters or whatever and still be thinking about a bunch of other different things, right? Because you're so proficient. But in jiu-jitsu, if you allow your brain to get distracted for 2 seconds, boom, someone's going to do something to you. And so for that was the blessing it provided me.
Yeah, I love that.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool, because I just keep thinking about how life is like that, and sadly there are people in all walks of life that are going to do something to you if you don't pay attention. I told Liz I almost got run over today going across a crosswalk, and because I was my brain was elsewhere. Yeah,
being present and focused, I think, is a key to being able to get the most out of your day too, right? I mean, I think it's important that and actually, it's funny we should mention this. So. The way I like to look at my day is I like to be present, focused on whatever I'm doing, then switch gears to the next thing, then switch gears to the next thing, then switch gears to the next thing. I find that I optimize the time there the most, like you're AMRAPing, right? Like you're going for as many reps as possible. And it's interesting because yesterday I was actually at church, and if you almost go to anywhere else in the world, that's an exaggeration. Most people, most of the time, if you go to a restaurant, if you go to anything, probably going to be, I'd say at least 30% of people are going to be on their phones, right? And I went to church, and there was this person like 3 rows ahead of me that pulled out their phone for a short period of time. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, that's so odd, because everybody else in there was like super engaged on the message. And it's just a good example of like AMRAPing and being present, that you get so much more out of what you're going there for when you have that mentality than if you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And that's not just to do with obviously faith. It's a whole different conversation. I just mean that in terms of your performance or work related.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about your Christian journey. I mean, how did you get introduced to faith? What's your background like? I mean, babysit us. Walk us through it, man. Yeah.
A Christian journey, huh? I mean, I don't even know what you would call it at this point. I grew up in a private Catholic school. So I went to private Catholic all throughout elementary, all throughout high school, private Catholic. And in college, I went to a Jesuit university called Santa Clara University, which is up north in California. And, I took like a course in college called Science versus the Bible, which I found pretty interesting. The professor was like pretty like objective about it, wasn't really trying to place his bias on it. But at the time in college, I kind of had a negative stigma around religion, especially like organized religion. And the reason why I had that is just growing up, it was just so methodical. It was just like, stand up, sit down, say this, do that. And it was just like, I don't know. I just felt like it was something I was forced into. And so I resisted it. You know, when I had an opportunity not to go anymore, I didn't go, right? Because I was forced to go in school. And so as I got older and I didn't have to go, I didn't want to go because I got nothing out of it. I found no fulfillment from it. And fast forward a bunch of years, right? I'm kind of trying to find a little bit more faith in 2016 when Ava was diagnosed, kind of circling it, kind of like I was never the guy who was like anti it. I was never the guy that would judge someone who had faith. I actually really appreciated that. I actually really looked up to that. It just wasn't something that was gravitating to me that strong, but I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I wouldn't call myself like resisting. I'd say like I had an idea that there's a greater being, that I believe that things do happen for a reason and that there is a plan. Even till today, I still haven't connected those dots. Right. But anyways, fast forwarding, I wasn't the guy who was like anti it. I would go if someone wanted to go to church, I'd go with them. Like I have no problem. My kids go to a private Catholic school. But I just would always try and go to these homilies and listen to the priest. And like, I would really go there, like present and focused. Like I would really want to like, give me something powerful, like, let me learn. And I would always just walk away and just be like, dude, like I got nothing from that. So just like, I wasn't inspired.
Yeah.
So anyways, you fast forward, kind of like dabbling here and there, nothing crazy. Right. And then as of recently, I'd say like the last, I don't know, year ish, I've just been kind of like really trying to tell myself, hey, be more open-minded, really explore and look for other, churches, other opportunities, because a lot, some of my really good friends would always tell me like, hey, look, you're getting too wrapped up in organized religion. You need to develop a relationship with God. And they would always say this to me and I didn't really get it. And then I'd say about a year ago, I started really saying to myself, hey, I'm going to listen to the Bible. I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to go to a Christian church where the energy is night and day, right? You got great music with a passage from the Bible where they try and explain it. And I'd say that's kind of where I'm at right now, right? I brought my daughter a few times and I'm searching for faith. I'm searching to be the person that could say, hey, that's God's plan. I'm searching for this and actually believe it. That's where I'm at right now on my current journey. And I have so many questions, right? But that's where I'm at.
My question is why? Why do you want to be that person?
That's a good question. Maybe some of it's selfish. Maybe not. I just find that life is hard, right? Life is hard. And my family and I, we've gone through quite a bit. My daughter was in a 3-month residency program. She just got out of this being away from us for 3 months for some health issues. We've just been through the ringer in some ways, right? And when things like that happen, you start asking yourself like, hey, what am I doing here? Right? How do I make a bigger impact? What is the plan? And how do I believe in something bigger than myself? Right? How do I find purpose in something bigger than myself? And I find purpose in, I host weekly men's club workouts that I do give free workouts. I find purpose in owning gyms that give back. We do all kinds of philanthropic stuff, but I just kept saying to myself, like, there's got to be a bigger vision and something that I can align myself with, that I really feel committed to that plan to live a good life and to, I don't know, I guess that's kind of where I'm at, is I guess alleviating some of the stress of life by believing that there's a greater plan in mind. And also wanting to, I don't know, just explore to understand it more. That's all. There's just so much to go down.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. And it's fascinating because, I mean, like, you talked about, going to a Jesuit school and going to a private Catholic school and your kids going to a Catholic school. Well, what makes you feel like Christianity is the thing that you're looking for, the thing that's going to supply these responses and answers for you?
That's another great question.
All your Christian friends are mad at me right now for asking that, by the way.
I'll tell you this. It isn't, I know that what I don't need is to sit in a church and get spoken to about stuff that like I can't relate. Like I don't want to listen to a eulogy that does nothing for me. I want to be inspired. I want to live a better life. I believe I do live a good life, but how do I get even better? How do I treat people even better? How do I become the best version of myself? And, because I'm addicted to optimization, meaning like I want to be the best dad, period. I want to be the number one husband. And it's not that I don't want that for other people too. I want that for them as well, but I just want to be able to reach my potential. And I feel like unless I unlock some of these concepts of faith, I don't know if I'll be able to reach my potential. Because I think there's a whole nother area that I'll be able to get to once I really start to understand, I guess, living in, and having faith in God. I mean, and I guess Christianity calls mainly because it's just, I'm surrounded by it, right? Like the Catholic Church is a little bit, just was boring to me. Jesuit, I couldn't even speak to the exact differences. But the Christian faith and understanding relationship with God, I guess, has been where I'm going at.
Yeah. Well, if you're attracted to the complexity of CrossFit and the dynamism of jiu-jitsu, you fasten your seatbelt, brother, because Christian spirituality is going to blow those out of the water. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. So I was in church yesterday, and like, honestly, I'm at a point now, and I'm only going to be able to get away with this for so long. So I'm just going to own it for the time being.
Yeah.
Like all of it is just way over my head, right? Like I was listening to the book of John today in the sauna, and I'm like, okay. And then so I'm really trying to understand. I mean, and I have so many questions that just are probably so stupid, to the person who like really understands. But it's like, you're listening to the book of John, you're hearing stories about Jesus and what he's done. But then I don't know, I guess then he's getting persecuted. And then he, obviously, there's just so much unpack on the history. And then even calculating like how you get to the point where these stories were true and so many people saw them and then they wrote about them and then
So what advice are you getting right now? I mean, you say you got a lot of Christian friends, you got people around you, so they got to be so excited that you're doing this. What do they keep telling you?
I mean, they just kept telling me explore. I mean, this one woman at the summit I was just at, she actually wrote me, I actually have them right here next to me, some like Bible verses that she thought that I would feel compelled by, right? One of them in particular that she has for her son. Our verse for our son is, be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong, let all that you do be done in love. She just like wrote this down. Like, so I'm getting a lot of like people come up to me, talking to me about this, but I'm trying to like explore it on my own and really trying to make heads or tails of like, the stories, Jesus, right. What was there before Jesus and Moses? I couldn't even tell you. Like, I mean, there's just so much history.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a big book. Yeah.
And I think the part that's really interesting too is like, why now and why this? I don't know. I do feel like there's been some situations in my life where, it's just like calling to you, right? Like, it just keeps getting brought up. It keeps being put in front of your face. It keeps being presented to you. And it keeps, especially in times where things have been really, really hard. I have wanted to lean on a relationship to believe that God had a plan. I have. But I think that, in the past when I would say things like that, like, I think in my heart, like I wanted to believe it, but I'd like to get to the point where I really believe it. Right. Because when things get really hard, it's nice to feel like, hey, this is part of the plan. Just stay the course, keep doing great things and all will work out.
Yeah.
I think that first, I just want to say, I think that it's really cool and inspiring to see, people, we sometimes look at people and we're like, man, they got it all together. Look at them. Like, he's an awesome athlete. He's got a great family. He's got a great gym. He's got a great business. Like all these things, you really have it together, which you do, right? But being able to say there's something else, There's something else than all of these things that I put myself in. I'm still missing something. And being unsure what that is, that's totally okay. I think that coming out and being able to be real and ask those questions and be like, yeah, man, I don't know all the answers. I don't even know why I'm asking these questions. They're just questions that I'm asking. I think that is so cool, first of all. Secondly, as a coach, as a jiu-jitsu coach, I would say like, we teach in the way of game planning. So like, when I have an athlete that comes in, there's so much jiu-jitsu. Like if you tried to just like, every time you've seen someone like, oh, here's an armbar. Oh, here's a triangle. Oh, here's how you choke. Like, oh my gosh, you would be so overwhelmed. Like, I don't even know where to start. I totally suck at this sport. Like I'm not getting anywhere. So if you think about taking a game plan for jiu-jitsu. Like, I want to get good at this. I know what an armbar is. I'm going to take the armbar and I am going to explore that from every position. And I'm going to get so good at it that no one can stop me, even upper belts, right? People who are competing all the time, like they can't stop me. Now, I might not know everything there is to know about jiu-jitsu, but I'm really freaking good at arm bars. Right? So if I think about that, and when I approach like learning anything else in life, whether it's, a new language or, a new lesson in school or class or something like that, or faith, I want to approach it as having a game plan. And some of the things that you mentioned were like, I just want to love people better. Like, that made my heart so happy to hear that, because I feel like that's all I really want to do. Like, I just want to love people better. And I think being able to do that is going to make me a better person. It's going to make me a better coach. It's going to make me a better wife. It's going to make me a better mom, a better friend, all of these things. And it's going to allow me to have a relationship with the one person who taught us how to love people perfectly. And so I think that if, in some of these questions and stuff that you have about faith and like, all of this is true. And, when you're explaining it, I can see like, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming and I just don't even know where to start. Like, think about it as you approach jiu-jitsu. Like, I want to get good at the armbar. Well, I just want to know what he said about loving people. Right? And so if you just explore that, just that, and kind of start with those little things, and I'm not saying it has to be that, but that is an example that you brought up, so I'm using it, but just start with that and start feeling like, what did that feel like? What did he say about this? Think about the things that Jesus said, right? He's the one who taught us how to love people and how to do that perfectly. So I think that, just approaching it that way might make it feel, for me, as an athlete, as a competitor, as a student of jiu-jitsu, like, that would make it for me less overwhelming, and it would give me a good starting point.
Yeah. The game plan is a great metaphor for thinking about God's plan. Because oftentimes the way people of faith will talk about God's plans or God's purposes, it's really narrow and it's really specific. Like, is it God's plan that I almost got run over today? What reason did that happen for in the great divine scheme of the universe? Like, well, probably that wasn't something God was super excited about. But instead, think about a game plan, to develop David into a person of great love. That's God's game plan. To allow David to metabolize all the crummy stuff that happens in David's life. And instead of me being resentful or becoming a victim or getting further away from people, God's game plan is that David would become softer, more teachable, more humble, more resilient, more perseverant. But I think when we think about God's plan, we ought not to think about it as something quite so fragile or so specific as every single thing, every single finger gesture, every single cup of coffee sip, every single misreading of death before decaf or whatever. God's not quite so fragile.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think that breaking it down into, parts and, obviously, one of the things I do know for sure is that there's something to the faith. Like, it's so, I know it sounds cliche, but like, everybody I know who gets deep into faith, they're living, and I don't know their full stories, right? And a lot of them have come from different backgrounds where, I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, JP, and he had some difficult times when he got out of the SEAL teams. He had some difficult times and kind of rekindled his relationship with God, and it did a lot for his life. And he was sharing like this, and one of my buddies on the podcast asked, like, what if life isn't like going bad? Like what? And I think for me, it's like, you know, to your point, like, it's not like I'm having to overcome some tremendous struggle with alcohol or drug addiction or whatever. I'm just trying to ask myself, like, hey man, I got one life to live and I have one chance at this thing. How am I reaching my potential? And if this faith component, which is such an integral part of so many people's lives, is not even something I feel like I've even reached a fraction of my potential in, like, I have a duty to explore that. You know, it'd be like if someone is listening to this podcast and has never gone out and did a workout, like they have an obligation to go exercise because they're going to unlock so much more out of themselves that they have no idea about. And that's really the driving force between my journey. And I don't want to come off as anything other than who I am. Like, I am not going to sit here and say that I'm, you know, going to go scream from the hilltops about my relationship with God. That's not where I'm at, right? Where I'm at is I'm super curious and I'm just going to be super open-minded and I'm going to have great conversations like this. And I'm going to take away one little thing and then, you know, and I think that hopefully this is refreshing for some people to hear, because I think that oftentimes it's all or nothing. And I think that's very difficult getting in. It'd be like, you know, using the fitness analogy, it's like, when, you know, one of the things about CrossFit is, how do you know if someone does CrossFit? Well, they talk about CrossFit all the time, and it can be polarizing, right? It can be polarizing. And the same thing, not to the same extreme, by the way, I haven't witnessed this from a faith perspective, though. It can be at times because these people are so passionate and they only want to do good things. They are not bad people. They're just fired up and they want to share what's changed their life. Same as CrossFit, same as jujitsu, same as faith, right? But I think sometimes people think it's like all or nothing. Like, you're either all into jiu-jitsu, all into CrossFit, or all into faith. But I guess I'm just an example of someone who's like just scratching the surface. I'm just knocking at the door and I'm just trying to like navigate.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so exciting about it. Someone made a comment to me once that, like, well, we just want all those like really loud Christians. And I'm like, wait, what? What about all the other Christians? Like, because I was in that space for a very long time. I mean, I got married super young to a guy who was like super awesome, really devout Christian. We went to church. We did all the things. Like, if you were to like write a storybook on what a Christian life should look like we were doing all the things. We were super involved in our church, and, you know, unfortunately he passed away, and that shifted me away from the church, actually. And I had a really rough experience with all of that. And I kind of like was like, where are you, God? I thought you were supposed to be here during these times. And, you know, later on I realized, like, you know, he was still there, and I made choices to leave the church and did that, you know, kind of thing. But I think one of the things that you brought up was, you know, building a relationship. And that is where I am now, and why it's so much different is because, like, I was doing all of the things, but when tragedy struck, I wasn't actually healthy. I didn't have a relationship with this God or you know, Jesus, or really understand that. I was like checking boxes and going to church and helping in kids ministry, and we did women's, you know, retreats and like all of these things, but I wasn't healthy. And so now my relationship is quite different. And although like it's easier for me to talk about, I definitely don't think that I'm like, you know, one of those Christians that are like screaming it from the rooftop and like, you know, I just want everyone to know. We were kind of having a conversation prior to this. It's like, you know, I had a good friend who, she was always so happy. And I heard someone ask her, like, because she's been through some tough times, and they're like, how are you still so happy all the time? And she's like, man, if you knew Jesus, you would just be happy all the time too. And I'm like, like, I just want to get to that point where I'm just like, no matter what happens, I know there's a plan. I know I have security in something other than these things here that I'm doing that can feel like I'm just twiddling my thumbs at times. Like, what is the bigger, greater purpose? And I feel like I'm finally, you know, years and years and years and years and years in, like, at a point where I'm like, building this relationship and able to have conversations like the one that we're having right now.
Yeah. It's a superpower. You know, I think training and fitness is a superpower. I think it does a lot in between your ears to unlock your human potential. I also think that people who have strong faith, it is a superpower too. I do. I've seen it firsthand where, a close friend of ours, they have a strong faith. They lost their son to a drunk driver, and their position was like, their faith got them through that the best they could. And I've seen it in other times. And I guess, I would love to get to the point where you stay so curious, you build such a relationship that you could get to the point where life's going to be hard, but you're able to really think like, hey, there's a bigger purpose to what's going on. And I think it'll give you more peace. I think it'll put you at more ease. And I think ultimately you'll be a better person along that journey. So that's kind of high level.
Okay, here's a question for you about the process that you're sort of taking with faith. In any sport, there's like book learning and then there's body learning. Like you can read a bunch of articles about CrossFit or nutrition, but at some point you're the one that's got to count your macros, watch your intake, etc. Same with jiu-jitsu. I mean, when I started jiu-jitsu, I bought a bunch of books on it, and then I read all the books and then stopped going to class. So I didn't really progress very far in jiu-jitsu, but I read a bunch of books. So you talked a little bit about some of the mental learning and experience that you're taking in faith. What are the sort of the non-mental things that you're doing? I mean, do you have any practices that you're trying? Are you praying a bunch? Do you go on spiritual walks? I mean, I don't know. What's the stuff that you're trying as opposed to the stuff that you're learning?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of crossover between, I guess to answer your question directly, I have been trying to be better. Well, two things. One is like, I'm going to church for basically like the first time in my life, right? On a semi-regular basis. And it's not where I want to get to. And I'm bringing my daughter with me, and it's been cool. It's been good. I don't know how long that'll last for, but it's been good. I've appreciated it. It's something that I could do where I leave there and I feel better than when I walked in. So it's almost like a really good workout for me, meaning like, I just love it. I like the way I feel when I leave. I've been trying to allocate more time in the sauna. And during that time, I've been trying to either listen to the Bible in 365 and or an audiobook of the actual Bible. And then I'll try and add some prayer in there. So those are like actual things I've been incorporating into my life that have been helpful, I'd say. And I think I'm barely scratching the surface of them, because I think still at times I'm not as present as I could be if I was praying or reading or listening. I think sometimes my thoughts still scatter, but I'm trying to make that a daily part of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. The sauna is actually a great place to do it. Like that's the right vibe. That's the right level of solitude. And I mean, not everybody gets a sauna, but if you have a sauna, what a great way to use it. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, there's so many questions about, like if you believe that Jesus came and that he did all these miracles and then he died for our sins, and then we were but then before Jesus, I was listening to the book of John, and they're talking about how, so from a religious perspective, what existed before Jesus? From a faith perspective, what exists before Jesus?
Is this a question that you want me to try and answer? Oh, it could just be a rhetorical question, in which case I'm like happy to have it hang out. Well, I mean, Jesus was a Jewish man, so he would have grown up within the Jewish religion, both as an ethnic Jew and as a person who was Jewish and would have gone to temple. He would have gone to the synagogue. So Jesus had his own set of religious practices. He would have done all the system of feasts and festivals. He would have worshipped like Jewish people then worshipped. He would have prayed like Jewish people then worshipped. He would have read and studied the Bible, or the books of the law and the prophet and the writings that we now collect into the Old Testament. I mean, he would have been very immersed in those sort of religious practices. And most biblical scholars would tell you that Jesus didn't come to invent a new religion, and that he didn't even really teach anything terribly distinct from the best practices and best teachings of the Jewish religion as it existed then. The thing that makes Christianity so different is not what Jesus taught, it's Jesus. It's who he was. Because Jesus is more significant than the sum of his teachings. Like he's better than the cool things he had to say. And the way he lived, in particular, the things that I find most compelling about Jesus are the way he treated women, the way he treated people who were outcasts, the way he looked after people that really like didn't do him any good or didn't do him any favors. I mean, he was the most remarkable figure in human history. So in terms of what existed religiously in the time of Jesus, before Jesus, the biggest influence that you would be important to understand for the story of Jesus is Judaism. What was it like? What we call Second Temple Judaism. Now, beyond that, there was a bajillion other religions. There's all the gods and goddesses of the Roman Empire, and there's, in other parts of the world, there's, Hinduism and Taoism and all that stuff. But as concerns the story of Jesus, Judaism is the big thing.
Perfect.
Well, I don't know if that was enough or if that was too much or too complicated or too simple or whatever.
That was perfect. That was the perfect answer.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Really hard to separate Jesus from his Jewishness. Probably not a good idea to try.
No, but I think that's helpful because, I'm starting to read some of these books and I'm hearing how like he, does some things on like the Sabbath day, which gets like some of the Jewish people upset. And I'm trying to like figure this out. I'm trying to like put it together. But that's helpful to understand that. And I'm sure that, some people listen to this and be like, bro, what do you do, Jason? Like, you're out of your mind, man. Why? How would you not know that was like the formal religion and that he kind of came up in that religion, but he embodied these things? But it's just, I don't know, it's foreign to me. So there's just so much to digest there, right? But I appreciate what you're saying about, it's really the way that he exemplified what he was talking about, right? And lived it. So thank you.
Well, I mean, just all the stories about Jesus are they're so peculiar, right? Like, first miracle, he decides to he's at a party and he turns water into wine. Like, don't miss the significance of the fact that Jesus, his coming out party is a party. Like, it's a lavish, wild, raucous party. I've been to some crazy weddings. I've never been to an 8-day wedding reception. I've certainly never been to an 8-day wedding reception where the most austere religious figures were the people who were staying right till the very end. Usually all the religious folks leave at the beginning. So the fact that Jesus tells us who he is by what he does, and what he does is throw great parties, that's incredible. That's as weird now as it would have been then. and we sometimes we kind of domesticate Jesus, or we sort of make Jesus like us instead of trying to figure out what he was really like. So we kind of turn Jesus into American Jesus or cool guy Jesus or CrossFit Jesus or whatever. And anytime we do that, anytime we sort of make Jesus like us, we miss the opportunity to learn what made him so astounding. So the more we kind of take Jesus on his own terms and sort of slow down and pay attention to the details of what was happening and pay attention to the strangeness of it, the more alluring he becomes, the more magical, mystifying, wonderful, exciting, cool he becomes, because that's why we're still talking about him. We're not talking about him because he was, at Starbucks 3 days a week having a latte. I mean, he was different, and that's what makes him so cool.
Yeah. And I think part of it too, like when you're looking at religions, you have 3 major religions of the world, all have Jerusalem or the Middle East as their main central point, right? So you have Muslim, you have, Judaism, and you have Christianity. And you start asking yourself these questions, or at least I have recently. It's like, dude, I don't know, man. Like there's got to be something here. If all these people believe that, and at some point they start to veer off, right? Where you have, obviously a slight difference of opinion, which then sparks a different religion or whatever it might be. But I mean, it starts making me just question, man, there must have been something to this area and this, in Jesus, for all of these stories to come up. I don't know. It's just every time you hear that, and if you look at it, you're like, you can't help but think there's got to be some truth to all of that. That's just something I think about.
Yeah, right. The fact that it's got some staying power. There's amazing people in history from 100 years ago, but we're not still talking about them. We don't go to church every day and remember, God, I can't even think of anybody, Erasmus, Martin Luther King, we it's not the same. It's not on the same level at all, even though those people were incredible. Mm-hmm. But Jesus towers, man.
That's why, it's just another piece of the journey, right? Is understanding and really, I think for anyone searching, and including myself, it's you got to there is a level of faith, right? There is a level where it's not just black and white. There has to be, you could believe the stories, you could read the Bible, but at some point you have to have faith in the fact that this was real, and there is a big, there is heaven for you to go to. And there has to be a faith component there. And I that's something that, obviously I struggle with a little bit too, right? Is that it's not so like, oh, that's a rock, right? Or that's a thing. It's more kind of abstract, you know what I mean? And it's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, when you're describing this feeling like, oh man, I got to explore this. I have this hunch that there's something more. We think that that's God. We think that that's God talking to you, and it's God sort of nudging you to learn more about the God who nudges, to learn more about the God who wants the best for you. And the process of getting what's best for you or me or any of us is the process of paying attention to those nudges by God, it's almost like it's like spiritual breadcrumbs, it's like God is coaxing us to learn more about our Creator, because if He's the one who made us, then He's the one who understands how life is meant best to be enjoyed. He's the designer, so he's figured out the design. So if we want to figure out the design, the best way to get it is with Him.
And it is complicated. It is complicated because there's so much information out there that almost information overload. That's one thing that has been difficult, right? Is deciphering where to start. In jiu-jitsu, it might be like, hey, start on your back or start on side control or whatever. It's like, okay. But in the Bible, it's like, well, where do you start? And then when the stories interweave with another story, that's a whole nother thing. That's very difficult.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So how have you been navigating that up to this point? Like who's helping you, or what helps you figure out where to get your bearings and where to go? I mean, do you got a buddy walking you through it, or?
Yeah, I think obviously I got some guys who are, like I said, we've been hosting these men's clubs and afterwards, I mean, we're doing like hard workouts. It's not about the face side, but I think afterwards just having conversations about this kind of stuff and just continuously having discussions, I think it has been what I'm currently doing. And maybe a couple of months from now won't be the best route. Maybe more structure would be good. Like the example I use, Liz, with like learning a language. Like I'm like learning a word here, a word there, a word here. And it might be better just to have like someone just be like, okay, this is the way you're going to start and finish. But for now it's working. Yeah.
And you say you've been reading or listening to the Bible. You said you were going to go through John. Is John the first book that you've been working through?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually the advice the sort of the standard advice is when somebody says, where should I start? People say, start with the book of John. That's why I was wondering.
Is that exactly what was given to me, right? The advice was, hey, start with the book of John. So that's what I started with.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah. And what's been the most confusing part about it?
I mean, obviously some of the language, right? In terms of like, I actually Googled, like one of the languages earlier, they use this verily. They use that term all the time.
Okay.
Verily. And because I'm listening to it on Audible, I just hear the guy's voice just all the time. Verily. So I looked it up on Google. I'm like, what the hell is verily?
Yeah. Good for you for Googling it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's stuff like that. And I think just kind of understanding better what role it'll play in my life and just starting off slow and making sure that I pay more attention to it than I had in the past, but don't go crazy on it. Like just be observant, be aware, take time, but recognize that just like fitness, it's a long-term journey that I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And that's what I was just going to say to you too, is like, don't be so hard on yourself. You're like, I'm so dumb. Like, I don't know. But like, if an athlete came into your gym, would you be like, you idiot, you don't know how to do a snatch? It's like, no, that's a complicated movement, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
I think people, I don't want to speak for everyone. For me in particular, I think Dave also, when we were talking, we're just so excited to know that like you do have questions and you're open to seeking those out. I think that whatever happens, it's like, just being a person who is able to say, hey, there might be a piece that I'm missing here, and I just want to explore what that looks like. And I have tons of questions, and being open to first honest and open to where you're at in that journey, I think is super cool and very relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then secondly, being able to go and say, okay, I know I have all these other things on my plate, but this is really important to me. I'm feeling that nudging, or I'm having these questions. Like, I want to explore what this is. And I feel like I would be doing myself a disservice if I was not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, and then, how that incorporates in the future for the kids, I think is important, right? I think having a better relationship with God is definitely a better way of going than just having them sit down, stand up. Like, I mean, just because I'm so jaded from it, right? I'm just so jaded that I would just go there and I would just be checked out the whole time. And I think not having them do that and having them develop a relationship, just like I'm trying to, I think is the key. And that could look different for different people, but I think just even expose them to that is key.
And they'll figure it out too. I mean, kids are smart, and they're so much more intuitive than we are, and they don't have the same kind of baggage that we do. And I was a pastor for a long time at a church that had lights and lasers and rock band, and people came with tattoos and T-shirts and all this kind of stuff. But in the little town that we're in, there's this beautiful cathedral. And when my daughter was little, she used to always call it fancy church. We'd drive by and she'd be like, Daddy, I want to go to fancy church. And I'm like, we're never going to fancy church. Fancy church sucks. Like, I've been to fancy church. It is a chore, man. And she's like, no, Daddy, I really want to go. So one time I said, okay, I'm going to take my daughter to fancy church. I said, we're going to go to fancy church and we're going to dress up and you're going to be like a princess. And so she's, maybe like 4 or 5 years old, gets her hair all done up pretty, puts on a dress and some special little earrings and necklace and sandals. And I put on a suit, which is not normal for what I was doing at church at the time. And we go to fancy church, and it's a disaster. Like, it's awful. People are very polite and very engaged in what's happening, but not my daughter. She's climbing all over the pews. She's grabbing the hymnals and she's clapping them like this so the dust clouds blow up, and she's got a dress over her head, and it was awful, right? And I'm politely, kindly trying to get her to just chill out and be cool and not, be an embarrassment and be disrespectful, And then in the middle, they invite everybody to stand up, and my daughter pops right up and runs into the middle aisle of the church and goes, Dad, fancy church is dumb. Let's get ice cream, and runs out the back door. I was like, oh dear Jesus, this is terrible. I felt horrible, And the people at the church were great. They all laughed and chuckled, because little girls are cute, and that was funny. But I just remember, right? Yeah, we're all gonna have our own journey of faith, and my daughter's no longer includes fancy church because
that's a great story. I love that. I bet you those people are just like crack fancy church, because it's the truth. It is. It's totally different than, like even the one that I went to yesterday, right? And no one cares. You can wear whatever you want, do whatever you want. Like, I mean, not do whatever you want, but you could just go, you could be whoever you are, right? You could wear a hat. You could wear short sleeve with tattoos everywhere. It doesn't matter. It's just, you're all there for the same reason.
Yeah, exactly, man. Well, that's very cool. Well, thanks again, dude, for taking time and chatting with us, man. If there's any way that we can do anything to look after you, to bless you, to make a positive difference in your life, we're in. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I think, my goal is just to, ever since, the beginning of time with having a little bit of a spotlight through CrossFit or social media or whatever, just sharing with people like what's going on. Like, I'm not really trying to sugarcoat it. I'm just sharing. And I think what's cool about that too is like when people look at this a year from now or 2 years from now, and you have a little bit more strong in your conviction, I think it'll be like, I remember listening to that guy say this. And so that's kind of where I'm at, is just kind of being really real and asking questions and then trying to explore them on my own. But at some point I'm going to probably need someone to really help me out.
Yeah. I don't know if you're on TikTok at all, but it kind of reminds me a bit of Russell Brand. Russell Brand is got all about Christianity, and so he's explaining it, sort of like Christianity for dummies, and it's great. It's hilarious,
Yeah, no. I saw a YouTube video of him talking about that, which I never thought I'd see him do. But it's been cool to watch his evolution too, for sure.
God bless, man. Thanks again for chatting with us. That was a lot of fun. Great to get to know you.
All right, thank you. Hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks,
you too. Cheers, man.